I can't believe it's been nearly 2 months. So this is when I looked at the top score farmers in Mania, and we really saw just how cracked the top percentile of players can get. I want to take this same concept, but also look at other areas within OSU, just to highlight some lesser known players who either aren't at the top of the PB leaderboards or aren't a super well known mapper. I will be mentioning the score leaderboard again, but really some other aspects as well, so make sure you watch all the way through, as there might be a player you know. Anyways, here's some of the most unhinged Mania players. For this first player, you probably haven't heard this name before. Salsa is relatively new to the score farming scene and has been crushing it as far as setting scores. Over the last 3 months, she has set over 8,000 SS scores and has been able to maintain a steady momentum. If we take a look at the SS leaderboards for Mania, we can see she currently sits at rank 9, with nearly 17,000 scores, edging closer and closer to rank 2 each day. When we talked a while back, she told me that her goal was to reach Sittard, so that would be rank 3, but I also believe she's possibly the only person who has the potential of even coming close to grilled cheese. That's such a massive grind though, so being anywhere in the top 5 would be just as impressive. If we go over to the rank score side of things, she sits at rank 20, knocking me out of the top 20, but that's no big deal. Now most of her scores are set with 4K mod, so that's taking a massive 78% multiplier for the majority of her scores set. So that's why she's not as high as some of these other SS farmers who usually play the map's key count accordingly, and that's my only critique. I guess you could call it that. Rarely do we see accounts pop up like this that decide to only set near perfect scores and have high accuracy. If you look at my account, I usually tend to avoid setting A scores, but I'm generally okay with setting S scores. Salsa has nearly 0 S scores and has 100% profile accuracy. It's honestly quite clean to look at, but I think I did mention something like this in a previous video. Basically, choosing to set up your profile like this can be very limiting. You're essentially only allowed to play and set scores within your comfort zone. Online, that is. And it can be super stressful when you do want to go near your limits and either set a high PP SS score or anything that might be difficult for you. This is also probably why she won't ever learn key counts higher than 4, which is super limiting in my opinion. I had this issue too when I started 10K. I saw these 1-star maps and my brain just had the expectation that I should be able to SS these. But after a while I just played them, submitting A and S scores, as you really do need to give yourself the opportunity to make mistakes in order to grow and learn. Being an SS or score farmer and not knowing how to play 7K seems like a massive limitation to have. And yes, there is the 4K mod, but as we saw, you do take a massive hit with the rank score reduction. But I guess if her main goal is really just the number of SS scores, then any amount of reduction from halftime or converting isn't that much of a big deal. So there was a little bit of drama going on in the OSU Perfect server a few weeks ago. No, not him. Basically, this guy Daniel popped out of nowhere and started sniping 2KY fangirl scores. I was curious about this, so I decided to send him a message on OSU. Not that kind of message. And yeah, the interaction was... the interaction was a thing that happened. I don't think I ever got a concrete answer as to why he was specifically targeting 2KY's fangirl scores, but maybe it's just a case of someone wanting to find some scores to get number 1 on. He's even taken a few of my old number 1 scores, but luckily a lot of my scores are in 7K or higher. So if you want to avoid players like this, really just learn 7K. I think that's going to be a reoccurring theme in this video. Anyway, over the last few months that he's been actively setting accuracy scores, he has achieved over 160 first place scores and probably has ticked off a few players within the OSU Perfect server. Honestly, this whole situation was pretty humorous. Whenever someone takes one of my old scores, it can feel like they just went out of their way to scroll all the way down and find a 4 or 5-year-old score. But from their perspective, it can literally be from the first map they decide to play, or they're just downloading new maps. Even if someone is going directly on your profile and looking for scores that they think they could beat, it's all fair game. You can't really expect to have a score forever if it's not maxed out. And honestly, this constant trading of first places is what drives the competition in the community and makes everyone keep improving as a whole. It's not exactly good to always compare your own performance and ability to other players, but it is a good way of putting things into perspective. If I were to set the score and it was first place, I would think to myself that it can be improved upon, but it's really good as it is, and I probably wouldn't even bother with it. Now if we see the actual leaderboard and that I'm in 12th place, well now I feel like I could and should do so much better if I decided to replay the map. When the bar is set so low, we become complacent and feel like our efforts are good enough. But when the bar is set high and the leaderboards are so stacked, everyone is putting their best efforts for the top 8 placements, and this is what leads to improvement and higher outlooks. Either way, to finish with Daniel, I will say that I appreciate when new players come into the high accuracy playstyle and really set the bar for everyone. It provides more interest in competition, and it's nice to see more players caring about accuracy. Enjoying the video? Feel free to leave a like and to subscribe for more videos. If you're an active member in the 10K community or have been trying to rank a map recently, you probably know about this next player. Hugged. And where do I even begin? Let's start with the playing side of things. Hugged is one of the best 10k players in Osu, probably the best 10k player in America, give or take, depending, whatever. Honestly, if you're able to have 10k PP contribute to your profile, you're doing really well. Recently, he's been getting into a lot of 10k 2S and 16k, and even some 18k at some points. Really an overall talented player who keeps pushing the higher key count limits. But there's a massive elephant in the room. Yep, flashlight. I honestly don't know why. I just don't get it. I think I asked about this before, and I guess it just boils down to a rating thing. But even then, like, I could literally just do the math with scroll speed and screen distance to get a number that he could in theory be comfortable with. But maybe it's not that simple. I talked about this in my previous skinning video about how flashlight in any screen cover or hidden cover can make accuracy and LN releases harder, and I think it shows for Hugged as well. Even his cover image is this thing, and yeah, this might be his biggest weakness. Let's take a look at Retribution Insane difficulty, for example. My 10k skills don't come anywhere near his, and some people might even say I'm an accuracy expert, but I feel like I'm just slightly above average. Either way, I have a sizable lead when it comes to the MA count, and it's not just me. A lot of scores beneath also have a high amount, yet his score and PP count still towers over all of us. This really says a lot about his skill and ability to just hit the notes, and maintaining high combo and a relative level of consistency, but his accuracy is less to be desired. I'm not sure if this is because of him using flashlight, or if it's a different thing that I'll get into, but if it is because of flashlight, is it something that he can improve upon, or would flashlight have to come off? When you read the notes, your eyes should be focused on the center of the screen. As they pass your field of view, the notes maintain the same velocity, so you're able to mentally time and keep track of each note, even if zones of the screen are hidden. The main issue comes from long notes, as these are essentially two entities that you have to keep track of in time. It's not impossible, but it does add a level of complexity, especially when each of these time zones begin to overlap and have variable lengths. Bump up the key count, and it adds even more complexity. Now, I was going to go into about how Hug doesn't really play low star maps, but after doing a bit more looking, it seems like he's nearly played every 10k ranked map, maybe missing a few 1 stars here and there. But yeah, scores across the board. So I guess I would say he should really have more focused accuracy sessions on maps that aren't exactly pushing his upper limits, and maybe even put Hard Rock on a few times. Usually when people can't set clean high accuracy scores like this, it's because they either lack the finger control and consistency to hit every note, or it's that their window of consistency is rather wide. And if that's the case for Hugged, playing on Hard Rock timing windows, or even just focusing on being more accurate with his keystrokes and having a good scroll speed or visuals for reading can help. Honestly though, this just seems like one of those things that you improve at over time, but it's gotta be something that you're mindful about. Moving on to the creator side of things, and Hugged is still amazing. Glancing at the 10k rank section, and it seems like he's contributing to over 40% of the content. Many maps in the graveyard and pending section, seems like every other week he's taking on a big mapping project. He's even got his 18k map sets, as well as a 16k one he's been working on recently. Within the server, he's been very helpful with map playtests and overall encouragement when it comes to mapping. There's also been some efforts about converting the BMS 10k2S packs, as well as pushing towards the ranking of 12 key, so I'm excited to see what comes of that. Recently, Hugged became a BN, so he's been putting a lot of work into modding many maps. It's honestly kind of funny seeing him mod 4k maps in the VC, but it must be nice for a lot of newer mappers to finally get some attention from a new BN, even if their maps are... I just hope he doesn't burn out. Look at the amount of effort that went into this one map. It's incredible. If that were me, I probably would have just told the guy to remap it all. It really feels like I finally have a chance at ranking one of my maps, because of how the BN thing is in Osu. But that's a topic for another video. Either way, it truly feels like Hugged is one of the most influential people of 10k in Osu. There's one more mapper in the 10k scene I'd like to highlight, and that's Hyperstream. This seems like one of the most obscure and unknown players in Osu. They're not really active in the Discord, and rarely do I ever see them on leaderboards. But this dude is a mapping machine. Over 130 map sets uploaded to Osu, each with many difficulties and of many different key counts. I've never seen someone map to this degree of versatility, outside of a handful of ranked maps. What is this? If you're looking for more 10k maps, literally just go to this dude's profile and start downloading. There's a lot of maps that help bridge the gap between 4-star and 5-star skill. His mapping style is very interesting, very different from the traditional stuff we see in the rank section, yet also different from the 5+5 style of BMS charts. There's like a usage of a lot of brackets and mapping streams in one set of columns, and then switching to another set, and then back to the first one. And even a lot of these winding staircase patterns, they can really wrap on one hand, and then goes into the other hand. These are incredibly awkward to play at first, especially if you're not experienced, but after a while these feel super comfortable and fluid to play. We shall call these hyper streams. This video isn't going to be a full in-depth map analysis type of thing, but I did want to point out one map pattern in particular. On the 10k SC difficulty of the song, the ending section uses the stream pattern that starts on the leftmost column, and then repeats on the next column over. After 4 measures, it starts the pattern on the rightmost side, with a similar motion going in the opposite direction. This section repeats. Afterwards, he switches to a more dynamic stream pattern for the last repetition, which doesn't seem to be following any sort of strict patterning. Since the last phrases of this song are repetitive, Hyperstream did a great way of capturing that while also giving the map a bit of variation, so that it's not exactly the same pattern every measure. It can be very cool when mappers set up certain rules or conditions to map under in order to follow the song well, and that can give the pattern more context and help players flow into each next pattern. If anyone's close to this guy, I'd love to know if he has any plans for having a ranked map or more love sets in Osu. He's contributed a lot to the 10K content we all play, and it would be great to see him get more recognition for it. This last player, I honestly don't know much about, but I see them at the top of most long note maps I struggle to get S on. One thing that I find really interesting is that their rank is rather low for the type of skill they possess. They're on par with players like Lothus, 2KY, and Polyester, all of which are near the top 1000. I said this before in my previous laser feature video, but if we had some sort of weighted accuracy or technical accuracy calculator in the PP system, these 4 players definitely belong within the top 20, 100%. I think the best way I could highlight this player is by going over some of their highest PP number 1 scores, as that's the only metric I could use. I have played every ranked map, but I don't remember each and every difficulty directly. Anyway, this first map is Grievous Lady. While this map isn't super heavy on the long notes at first, it does have a relatively high tempo and might be stamina inducing for some players. During the first KcHecKa time, we get some 1/6 bursts here and there. These aren't too long, but going in and out of 1/4 to 1/6 timing without any color indication at this BPM is quite impressive, not to mention the Ellen burst and a few Ellens dotted here and there. In the midsection, the player gets a break with some relatively simple long notes, but the second and ending KcHecKa time is where things really pick up. We have some more 1/6 bursts, with even some 1/8 thrown in there, with all types of Ellen shielding and variable Ellen lengths between the hands. This is all for a runtime of nearly 6 minutes. Incredible SS score with a remarkable MA difference. End Time is a more popular farm Ellen map with many SS scores on the board, but that doesn't take away from the accuracy required to maintain this high ratio. I'm going to assume more of these players would say it's an easier map to set a score on, since at least it's shorter in length and for the most part a lower tempo, but it does have its fair share of these varying Ellen sizes. On the weirdest beat snap divisor, I legit don't know what's going on here. Patterns like this take a serious amount of finger control because each column is basically doing its own thing at different times, and you have to pay attention to so much in order to maintain a high ratio. The last map is probably the hardest of the bunch. Weenie Walker is a more traditional Ellen map in the sense that long notes are longer and there's more noodling going on between the columns rather than just fast streams with short Ellen lengths. There's not much to say outside of the usual finger independence required for these type of maps, but the fact that at any moment you're just a few milliseconds too long holding it down a note can invalidate your entire SS score really just puts into perspective the level of consistency required for what you're seeing. When I first started score farming, I always told myself that a lot of these maps would be impossible to SS anyway, and that it seemed like a waste of time to even bother. Even now, I'm still struggling to play these on halftime, yet there's players out here setting the most accurate scores on the most incomprehensible finger controlled induced maps. It can really change your perspective on what's humanly possible in this game. It is nice to see players doing their best and everyone being happy for them. As you can see, there's a lot of interesting and unique players who are either pushing the limits of gameplay or are providing a lot of meaningful content in Mania. I feel like I barely scratched the surface, as I mostly focus on the score leaderboard and 10K side of Mania. I do plan on making another video like this in the future, so if there's any players or mappers you think I should look at, please comment below, as well as any general video ideas or thoughts about this video. I'd love to hear them.